A productive final day of the draft for the Buccaneers as they beef up the defense and special teams. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. This episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later in the show. After taking wide receiver in round 1 and then doubling up on cornerback in rounds 2 and 3, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers entered day 3 of the draft and continued to take the best players available at positions of need. In the 4th round, they took Central Arkansas edge rusher David Walker. In the 5th round, they took SMU edge rusher Elijah Roberts. Then in the 7th, they took Oregon wide receiver Tez Johnson. That means the final tally of draft picks is 2 receivers, 2 corners, 2 edge rushers. We're going to talk more about Roberts and Johnson coming up in a little bit, but let's start things off with David Walker. Now, going back to my edge rusher episode to kick off the positional big boards, Walker was someone that I talked about that I liked a lot, and the Bucs could get on day 3. Which was absolutely wild considering the production that he had in college. The problem was he went to Central Arkansas. So the production that he had in college was a man amongst boys. He showed he could go against Power 5 talent at the Senior Bowl where he was one of the shining stars. And we all know how much Jason likes to find his small school guys. For those that didn't catch the edge rusher episode or don't remember, here's a quick refresher of what I talked about. I started by saying that this guy isn't getting nearly the amount of buzz that he should. Part of it is his size. Part of it is that he's coming out of Central Arkansas. So Walker is 6'1", 260, but he was PFF's number 1 edge rusher in 2024. He was the 20th ranked edge rusher in 2023 and the 2nd ranked edge rusher in 2022. Now, I had expressed concerns about the competition that Mike Green went up against with Marshall. Those same concerns were valid in this case, but we aren't talking about pick 19 anymore. We're talking about day 3, pick 121, a pass rush win rate of 21, 12 sacks last season, and 37 sacks over the last 3 years. This guy is crazy athletic, a RAS score of 8.63, where his explosion was great, composite ability was good, and speed was great, running a 4.69 40 with a 1.65 10-yard split. He found a way to use his size to his advantage and has the speed and the arsenal of moves to make bigger tackles look foolish. So that was what I said on my edge rusher big board episode that dropped the week before the draft. But what did Dane Brugler say about him in The Beast, his annual draft guide for The Athletic? Quote, one of the most productive players in FCS history. He collected 82.5 tackles for loss and 39 sacks over the past 4 seasons. A 3-time consensus All-American, his trophy case got pretty crowded. He won the 2024 Buck Buchanan Award as the top FCS defensive player and Conference Defensive Player of the Year honors 3 consecutive years. He burst off the ball with pop in his hands to bully FCS blockers and didn't look out of place against better competition during Senior Bowl practices. Overall, Walker isn't a one-trick pony. He uses his core strength and body quickness to mix up his rush attack, although his lack of length will be tougher to overcome against NFL tackles, end quote. PFF's stable metrics had him rated in the 98th percentile in pass rush win rate, 99th percentile in pass rush grade in true pass sets, and run stop percentage, and 100th percentile in run defense grade. His NFL comp, Shaq Barrett. Look, Jason Light said that he was comfortable with the depth at edge rusher, but he would not avoid adding more depth, and that's exactly what he ended up doing. I mentioned on the live show after day 2 that I didn't think his comments about Ramirez or Watts was going to stop him from drafting a guy on day 3. And then they find David Walker falling to them at pick 121. And I know a lot of you wanted Jack Sawyer. I wouldn't have been mad about it. You guys know that I was talking about Jack Sawyer throughout the draft process. I tweeted out when the Bucs were on the clock that I wouldn't mind getting Jack Sawyer. But I also said how much I liked Walker and how I thought he deserved far more attention and consideration than he was getting. Then, of course, the concern that I mentioned then, it's still true now. It's probably true for the Buccaneers, but they saw the traits and the measurables and the film to make them believe that it was worth a shot. But it was whether or not he can translate success at an FCS school to the NFL. We've had those same concerns about every small school guy that the Buccaneers have taken throughout Light's tenure, but Light and his scouts have been pretty spot on when they decide to shoot their shot on these small school guys. So 31 sacks with Central Arkansas, 8 with Southern Arkansas his freshman year. Walker is an absolute monster, guys. I mean, 6 forced fumbles over the last 3 years, 63 tackles for loss at Central Arkansas, including 23 last year alone. This is a guy that will be an immediate addition to the rotation and has all the speed that you want to go with a solid repertoire of pass rush moves that are already locked and loaded, and you can still improve on those and grow that arsenal of pass rush moves. So I absolutely love this pick for the Buccaneers. I know a lot of other people that really loved this pick. Twitter was abuzz with, David Walker is going to make guys pay for sleeping on him for being a small school guy, and the Bucs just got a huge steal, and oh my goodness, you added him to Todd Bowles' defense. This is going to be incredible. So we'll see how it all pans out, but you have to like the traits. You have to like the raw ability that you see. And I can't remember who it was for the Buccaneers. I think it was McCartney that mentioned when you're watching the tape of these small school guys, you shouldn't have to look for them. You shouldn't have to know where they're lining up because they're going to jump off the tape. Because when they're good enough to make it to the NFL, they're always the one that's going to pop on the screen every single play. You are going to tell that on any given play, they are the best football player and best athlete on the field every single snap. That's exactly what David Walker was. So excited to see what he's going to be able to do in this defense. Excited to have him added to the pass rush rotation. But what about that other edge rusher that the Bucs drafted out of SMU? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. There's nothing like the atmosphere of an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment feels huge. It's electric in the arena, and with Game Time, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Game Time makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, even when demand is sky high, and prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer. Their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. I absolutely love the all-in pricing. That means no surprise fees. When I get to check out, what I see is what I pay. Go ahead and check out the photos of the Celtics games that I took my son to that are on my Twitter page from early April. Those seats were incredible deals thanks to my friends over at Game Time, as were the seats that I got last year in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals between the Celtics and the Pacers. You want to talk about an electric atmosphere? That was incredible. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stop. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. In the fifth round, the Bucs went to SMU for edge rusher Elijah Roberts. Now, Elijah isn't a guy that I talked about on my edge rusher show, but that's probably a good thing because I don't think he's going to be an edge rusher. Pewter Report talked about this on their live show, and once I finally had some time after the lacrosse tournament to sit down, take a look at him, watch him a little bit, I wholeheartedly agree with what they were saying over there. This is William Golston's replacement. He's going to be a defensive end along the line, not a stand-up edge rusher. 6'4", 295, Roberts finished as a top 10 edge rusher in each of the last 2 seasons. He had a pass rush win rate of 22.5% while racking up 21 sacks over the last 2 seasons. He's versatile enough that you can line him up across the defensive line in a 3-4, but he has the burst that you want to collapse the pocket and open up rushing lanes for those stand-up edge rushers, as well as the guys that are coming in and blitzing across the middle. As for Dane Brugler and the Beast draft, I just forgot the term for it. The draft guide, my apologies to Dane Brugler and the Beast, but he said, quote, Roberts struggled to find a consistent role in 3 years at Miami, but he flourished with the Mustangs and combined for 131 pressures over the past 2 seasons. That's number 1 in the FBS over that span. Roberts has a very unique body type for an edge rusher, but he knows how to affect the quarterback by leaning into his strengths, specifically his long arms and ability to create force at contact. Overall, Roberts is more deliberate than dynamic as an athlete. He accelerates well in short areas, and power is the foundation of his game, which shows both as a pass rusher and an edge setter. His uniqueness might scare off some teams, but he has the goods to be a rotational edge with upside on the interior. End quote. My apologies again. I'm all out of sorts today, guys. PFF's stable metrics had him in the 86th percentile in pass rush win rate, 90th percentile in run stop percentage, and 92nd percentile in pass rush grade in true pass rush sets. 17.5 sacks over the last 2 years with SMU compared to just a half sack over the course of 20 games as part of the Miami Hurricanes. Over the last 2 years, though, focusing on his time at SMU, 4 forced fumbles, 3 passes defensed, 23.5 tackles for loss. This is a guy that can get in and disrupt everything. He needs to process things a little bit faster. Lower body technique does need a little bit of work. He tends to be straight-legged a little too often, which allows for offensive linemen to be able to kind of push him off his spot and gain the upper hand in these one-on-one battles. But he has shown high-end talent and traits while having, just basically fixable problems at the end of the day. We all love Will Golston, and I think that had Roberts not fallen to them in the 5th round, they might look to bring Will Golston back, even though Golston has been in the league for an incredibly long time. But Roberts now slides into a role where he can rotate in for Logan Hall. They have CJ Brewer that can be in the mix as well as part of that defensive end rotation. Then, of course, you still have Kalijah Kancey, you still have Logan Hall, you still have Vita Vea, you bring back Greg Gaines. You have a defensive line now that has a solid rotation, a reliable rotation where guys are not entering they're not coming onto the field in relief of the starters, and all of a sudden you're missing something. You have a guy that can't get to the quarterback. You have a guy that can't be effective in run defense. All of these guys all across the board have shown the ability to get into the backfield to disrupt passing downs. They can get into the backfield or clog up running lanes to disrupt the rushing game. These are all do-it-all guys. Now, you still need to see a big step up from Logan Hall compared to what he's done. He was kind of up and down all season last year. He would look great for a couple weeks. He would disappear for a month. Then he would be fantastic for 3 out of the next 4 games. You have to find that consistency, especially when he's entering a contract year. And you have Elijah Roberts now breathing down his neck, where if all of a sudden Roberts keeps coming onto the field in relief of Logan Hall and is outperforming him as a run stuffer, as a pass rusher, as a guy that is clogging up run lanes or clearing a path for Hassan Reddick or David Walker to come screaming in off the edge and get a sack, now all of a sudden Logan Hall becomes expendable. So not only is this a great addition to the depth of the defensive line, but it's creating a sense of urgency. It's creating a sense of competition for Logan Hall to be forced to elevate his game. Maybe that's what he's been missing. Maybe that's kind of the last puzzle piece to really get Logan Hall to reach his full potential on a more consistent basis. But Elijah Roberts as a 5th-round pick is no joke. Like, this is a dude that can come in and absolutely be a major part of Todd Bowles' defense, as they try to get back to being one of the best run-stopping defenses in the NFL, as they try to improve over one of the less than stellar pass rushes in the NFL. Because as much as we need, edge rushers and you need those guys to do their jobs, and Yaya to step up and turn pressures into sacks, and Reddick to return to form that he had before he went to the Jets and all the mess there. The edge rush isn't just about, or the pass rush isn't just about the edge rushers. It's about everybody. That's why last year you had Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey being the top sackers on the team. You still want that level of production. And if Elijah Roberts is going to come in and he's going to push Logan Hall out of the way, or push Logan Hall to be better because he's a guy that can get into the backfield and come away with 4.5, 5.5 sacks this season as a rookie, as a rotational player, all of a sudden you're looking at potentially addressing that position again in next year's draft, because they're not going to give Logan Hall the money. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka didn't get the money. Not from the Bucs. He got a little bit of money from the Browns, but he didn't pay it out. Pressures didn't turn into sacks. Wild inconsistency. So this is kind of a warning shot to Logan Hall, whether he wants to admit it or whether he likes it or not. But Elijah Roberts can come in and steal his lunch money, and he can do it in a real quick hurry. One final player to go over, and he's a fun one. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week, we're highlighting the top pick from our draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy that showed the strength and power to push the Buccaneers forward as we look ahead to next season. This week's Armada and clear-cut top pick of the draft is Benjamin Morrison, the shutdown corner out of Notre Dame. Morrison faced tough adversity returning from his hip surgery, but conquered the road back with his capability and confidence. Now that he's joining the Bucs secondary, he brings that rugged play style and attitude that the secondary needs. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Benjamin Morrison will do the second he sets foot on the field. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop NissanUSA.com. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast and recapping day 3 of the draft here for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And it was a long wait after selecting Elijah Roberts. And I think here the thought process for Jason Light and the coaching staff and all the scouts was best player available regardless of position, as long as it was somebody that could contribute in some way. The Bucs were going to take their highest rated player on the board. And that brings us to the 5'10", 154-pound Oregon receiver, Tez Johnson, which when you take into account that the fact that the Bucs signed Gators defensive lineman Desmond Watson as an undrafted free agent, and he's 6'5", 464 pounds, the Bucs now have the lightest and heaviest players in NFL history. Yeah, Desmond Watson is 3 Tez Johnsons. That's absolutely wild. But back to Tez Johnson, because I'm excited to talk about this guy. Johnson was the 16th ranked receiver in the draft class, according to PFF, and he had a drop rate of just 3.5%. He had over 2,100 yards since 2023 to go along with 20 touchdowns. He told the media at the Combine, more specifically, he told our good friend Bailey Adams over there at Pewter Report that he and Bucky are best friends. So he was already following the Bucs last year to cheer on his buddy. Dane Brugler had a 4th round grade on him in the Beast draft guide. Why can I not think of the word guide during this recording? My goodness. But yeah, in the Beast draft guide, Dane Brugler, 4th round grade on Tez Johnson. Bucs get him all the way in the 7th round. And Brugler said, quote, a 2-year starter at Oregon, Johnson worked primarily out of the slot in offensive coordinator Will Stein's spread scheme. 86.1% of his snaps the past 2 seasons came in the slot. With his explosive speed, Johnson is electric before and after the catch with no gear down required at the catch point, which makes him a nightmare for open field pursuit. He can stick his foot in the ground and fly. He tends to drift as a route runner and needs to expand his route tree, especially at the intermediate level. But overall, Johnson needs to improve on the technical side, and his lack of size and strength are limiting factors, but he is a blur when he runs and catches the ball with confident hands. Though he has NFL starting upside, he is more likely to be a role player who can produce on screens, shallows, deep verticals, and as a punt returner, end quote. The last part is where I want to focus right now. I said this on, I believe it was my reaction episode to the selection of Emeka Egbuka. It might have been in the day 2 live episode, but one of the last 2 episodes, I had expressed that Trey Palmer, to me, was the biggest loser of the selection of Egbuka. That Palmer and probably Rakim Jarrett were going to have a competition in camp to get that final wide receiver spot. I think Trey Palmer's time in Tampa has now come to an end. Johnson had an electric 85-yard punt return for a touchdown last season with Oregon. And then after adding Egbuka at pick 19, and then you bring in Tez Johnson, who is a guy that can make magic happen with the ball in his hands while being quick and shifty enough to create his own space. Palmer no longer has like a role or an obvious fit in this offense that other players can't already provide. So with Johnson, over 75% of his targets last season came inside of 10 yards. Yet he still had nearly 900 yards on the season to go along with 10 touchdowns. It was his lowest yards per reception while at Oregon. He finished with 11 yards per catch last season, which is down from 13.7 in 2023 and 15.6 in 2022. He had 27 fewer receptions in 22 than he did in 24, but he finished with just 42 fewer yards in that 2022 season. What got Johnson to fall to this spot were the measurables. First off, he's incredibly small. I already said it, 5'10", and the lightest player in NFL history. Second, he didn't test well at the Combine. A RAS score of 7.30. Johnson only ran a 4.51 40, but he also has a 37-inch vertical and a nearly 11-foot broad jump. Now, you're sitting there saying, everyone's talking about how fast he is, how quick he is, and then he runs a 4.51. Well, assistant GM Rob McCartney was asked the exact same thing when he spoke with the media on Saturday, and he told them, quote, there's not a lot of guys that have cracked it in the NFL under 160 pounds, but you've got the Tutu Atwells, you've got a guy like Tank Dell. He doesn't play 4.5. He plays a lot faster. There are a lot of instances where he's the fastest player on the field. There are multiple games where I thought he was the best player too. His roommate 2 years ago, Bucky, will vouch for that guy every day. he's one of his best friends. He plays the game the same kind of way, so that really excited us. We had a chance to spend time with him at the Combine. He was one of our formal interviews, and he just lights up the room. I think he'll be a great impact on the locker room and then on the field with his ability with the ball in his hands, end quote. McCartney went on to say that Tez will, quote, for sure play on special teams, and mentioned that he was a really good punt returner at Oregon and expects him to compete for that job in Tampa. Something else that you should probably know about Tez Johnson is the fact that since 2023, he has the most yards after catch in all of college football with 1,353. So basically 2/3 of his yards over the last 2 years came after the catch. He's not going to get involved in run blocking because of his size. That's going to be the running theme of how he's going to be limited as a player in the NFL. But the Bucs didn't bring him in to be the wide receiver 3 that needs to be out there on running plays. He's the wide receiver 5 or 6 and a situational guy. Think Scotty Miller. Miller wasn't on the field a ton, but he had big impacts in the games. He had big plays that helped the Bucs win games in that Super Bowl season. And Tez Johnson isn't as fast as far as straight line speed compared to Scotty Miller, but Johnson fills the role of a returner that can flip a field with quickness and the elusive running style that he has. He can take the top off the defense, but he can catch the ball on a short route in space and turn it into a 30-yard gain in the blink of an eye. He's explosive in the screen game, where he scored more than a few of his touchdowns while at Oregon in the screen game. I really wasn't expecting another receiver to be taken, but this pick makes a lot of sense when you factor in how underwhelming the return game has been the last few years for the Bucs. Now they have a guy that can take one to the house at any moment. PFF Stable Metrics puts Johnson in the 81st percentile in single coverage, 91st percentile in separation percentage versus single coverage, 95th percentile in yards per route run, and 99th percentile in open target percentage. He has found a way to get himself open no matter who is on him or what the coverage is to help him overcome those physical limitations. There's nothing he's going to do to change his size. You don't want him to turn around and put on 20 pounds. That's going to affect the way he plays. He has learned to play within the frame of his body, and he does it at an elite level. It speaks volumes to his perseverance and his desire to succeed, which has now brought him to the NFL. The guy's nickname is the Tasmanian Devil, which, first off, awesome. But it's because of how much he spins. I absolutely love that. All in all, to put a tidy bow on this, I really, really like this draft class. I know a lot of people were upset about the Bucs taking Ibuka at 19. I'm curious now how those people feel with the way this class rounded out and finished and played out over the course of the following 2 days. You have a locked and loaded wide receiver that on a lot of other teams that could have drafted him, he's a wide receiver 2 as a rookie. Here, he's the wide receiver 3 or 4. You have a locked and loaded starting outside corner. Jamel Dean's job is in danger. Plain and simple. Benjamin Morrison is not walking in here acting like a scared rookie. He is coming in here to take Jamel Dean's job. And that's exactly what I think he's going to end up doing. You have a slot corner that's going to be able to compete with Christian Izien to be a starter. You have an impact edge rusher to add to the rotation behind Yaya Diaby, Hassan Reddick, and Anthony Nelson. You have a new rotational defensive end to replace Will Golston that can absolutely burst through the line off the snap and is going to challenge Logan Hall to either put up or shut up. He's going to have to elevate his game if he wants to hold Elijah Roberts behind him. And then finally, you have the electric return man and another weapon for Baker Mayfield coming in the 7th round. I know some of you are disappointed they didn't draft a linebacker. Now, they got some as undrafted free agents, but one of the talking points after the draft was over was that a lot of teams didn't like this linebacker class. There were a lot of guys that I liked, but teams looked at these prospects and didn't see a lot of long-term potential. The Bucs were in a situation where they have Levante David coming back. They have Servassier Dennis, who's finally through the shoulder issue that he's been trying to play through. He had the surgery. Hopefully it's not something that he's going to have to deal with anymore. Then you bring in Anthony Walker. Those two can rotate in and out as needed based on the situation. You have Deion Jones returning. He joined the team last year. You have Antonio Greer and Deion Jennings. So Todd and Jason liked their current depth more than what they could have added in the draft. Coming up tomorrow, I'm going to go over some of the draft grades that the Bucs received from others, including super genius Mel Kiper, who absolutely jumped the shark over the course of this draft. And I'm going to give my own draft grades. But in the meantime, please check out everything going on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with those notifications turned on. And I want to thank each and every one of you so much. For those of you that have stuck to the end of the episode, we had the single biggest day in the history of this channel this past Friday. It was by far the most views we have ever had in a single day since Locked On Bucs joined YouTube. So I want to thank each and every one of you from the bottom of my heart so much for coming to this channel to get reactions and analysis about the NFL draft. I owe you guys everything. I love you all so much. So thank you for that. Make sure you are subscribed on the channel with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.